Persian Gulf, 42 kilometers off Iran's Keshm Island, 5:41 a.m. local time. The water lay dark and still, deceptively calm in those final moments before chaos. Then, without warning, the silence shattered. 38 high-speed attack boats roared to life across 4 separate launch points along the Iranian coastline, their engines screaming in coordinated fury as 200 Quds Force Commandos gripped weapons, explosives, and boarding equipment. This wasn't a harassment operation or a show of force. This was a meticulously planned assault on the USS Abraham Lincoln. 8 months of preparation, dozens of rehearsals using mock-up carrier structures, tactical innovations developed specifically for this moment. The next 11 minutes would determine whether Iran's asymmetric naval doctrine could actually wound an American supercarrier, or whether it would be exposed as fatal delusion. The strategic stakes were staggering. For Iran, this represented the ultimate test of asymmetric warfare theory, the belief that swarms of small, fast vessels could overwhelm technologically superior forces through coordination and sacrifice. For the United States, the challenge was existential. Could a 97,000-ton nuclear-powered supercarrier maintain its aura of invincibility against determined attackers willing to accept catastrophic losses? The answer would reshape naval doctrine and influence maritime security calculations from the South China Sea to the Mediterranean. What the Americans didn't know was that this attack had begun 6 hours earlier, not with gunfire, but with deception. Between midnight and dawn, Iranian intelligence had deployed a sophisticated reconnaissance screen. Commercial fishing vessels, seemingly innocent trawlers that worked these waters daily, had repositioned themselves along strategic corridors, tracking the carrier strike group's movements while appearing to conduct normal operations. Simultaneously, small commercial drones launched from coastal positions and hovered at low altitudes over the Gulf, providing real-time intelligence on destroyer positions, flight operations tempo, and defensive postures. The Americans detected some drone activity, but dismissed it as routine, a critical miscalculation. Iran had spent hours building an accurate tactical picture while remaining below the threshold that would trigger American defensive responses. 60 minutes before the assault, Iranian fast boats began deploying in 3 distinct layers, a tactical formation designed to overwhelm American decision-making through complexity and speed. The first layer, 10 to 15 decoy boats, had one mission: absorb American fire and create confusion. These vessels carried minimal personnel, loaded with radar reflectors and electronic emitters to appear more threatening than they were. The second layer comprised 20 to 25 boats carrying the primary strike force, Quds Commandos with RPGs, heavy machine guns, and shaped explosive charges designed to penetrate carrier hull plating. The third layer, 6 to 8 specialized boarding craft, carried the assault teams trained specifically for close-quarters combat aboard American vessels. Each boat knew its role, each commander understood the timing, and each man accepted that survival was secondary to mission completion. At 5:47 a.m., the attack began in earnest. The first wave, 15 boats arranged in a wide crescent formation, accelerated to 54 knots, spray erupting behind them as they carved through pre-dawn darkness toward the American carrier group. Aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, routine morning watch transformed into crisis in seconds. The AN/SPY-1 radar operator's screen suddenly populated with contacts. Not the usual 1 or 2 smuggling boats, 15 hostile signatures, then 23, then 38, all departing Iranian territorial waters at attack speed, all converging on vectors that would bring them directly to the carrier.
Captain Michael Richardson reached the Combat Information Center as alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the massive warship. His eyes swept tactical displays, showing a threat picture unlike anything in recent naval history. Multiple waves, coordinated timing, different approach angles designed to fragment American defensive responses. Sound general quarters. Weapons free on all hostile contacts. Get those aircraft launched or struck below now. His voice cut through rising tension like a blade. 97,000 tons of American naval power surged from routine operations to full combat readiness in under 2 minutes as thousands of sailors sprinted to battle stations.
The FA-18 Super Hornets, already airborne, dove from patrol altitude, screaming down through 2,000 feet, afterburners engaged, creating sonic pressure waves that hammered the lead Iranian boats with physical force. The boats rocked violently, spray erupting around them, but they didn't slow, they didn't deviate. Radio warnings on international frequencies went completely unanswered. These men had orders, and those orders were absolute. At 5:51 a.m., range closed to 7 kilometers. The USS Porter and USS James E. Williams surged forward, positioning themselves between the carrier and the approaching swarm, their Aegis combat systems acquiring targets with mechanical precision. Weapons free, engage. The USS Porter's 25mm Bushmaster cannon erupted first, tungsten core rounds streaking across water at supersonic velocity. The lead Iranian boat took 4 direct hits in 3 seconds, fiberglass hull exploding, engine detonating in a fireball, debris arcing through dawn sky as the vessel slewed sideways and began sinking. The second boat simply disintegrated under sustained fire, reduced from functional watercraft to floating wreckage in the span of a heartbeat. But the decoy layer was working exactly as planned. American destroyers concentrated fire on the most visible threats, while the second wave, 20 boats carrying the primary assault force, exploited gaps in coverage, approaching from a different axis at maximum speed. At 5:53 a.m., this second wave appeared on radar at 5 kilometers from the carrier's port quarter, forcing the USS James E. Williams to pivot rapidly and split defensive fire between multiple threat vectors simultaneously. Iranian boats scattered into evasive patterns, some zigging violently, others maintaining suicidal direct approaches, creating a targeting nightmare for American fire control systems. The destroyer's cannons fired continuously, staccato thunder rolling across the Gulf, tracer rounds creating brilliant lines through pre-dawn darkness. 5 boats from the first wave were catastrophically destroyed in 90 seconds. 3 more were disabled, dead in the water, their crews abandoning ship into churning seas. But 8 boats broke through the initial defensive perimeter, closing to 3.2 kilometers from the Lincoln. At 5:55 a.m., the tactical situation reached maximum intensity. The third Iranian wave, 8 specialized boarding craft, materialized on yet another approach vector at 6 kilometers, timing coordinated to arrive exactly when American defensive systems were fully engaged with earlier threats. FA-18s dove on the closest boats, 20mm cannons blazing, shredding 2 vessels in controlled bursts before climbing to re-engage. The USS Porter destroyed 3 more boats with precision fire, hulls holed, engines exploding, Commandos thrown into water as their craft sank or burned. But 8 boats from the assault layer had reached 1.8 kilometers inside the critical defensive zone where the carrier's Phalanx CIWS systems activated autonomously. The white dome housings rotated with lethal precision, internal radars locking onto approaching threats, computers calculating intercept solutions in microseconds.
The 6-barrel rotary cannons spun up with a rising electric whine that signaled imminent devastation. Brrr! The distinctive sound of Phalanx fire, a deep, resonating buzz that vibrates the air itself. 75 rounds per second, creating visible streams of depleted uranium projectiles connecting ship to target. The first Iranian boat exploded spectacularly, one moment a functioning attack craft, the next an expanding fireball and debris field. The second boat was cut nearly in half by a 3-second burst, sinking in less than 20 seconds. The third boat, however, achieved what Iranian planners had considered nearly impossible. Evading Phalanx fire through violent maneuvering and sheer desperate aggression, it closed to 800 meters before an RPG round fired from its deck struck the Lincoln's hull plating just above the waterline near the stern. The shaped charge detonated with a sharp crack audible across the water, penetrating outer plating and causing localized damage to a storage compartment. Secondary explosions were prevented by damage control teams, but the supercarrier had been touched, proof that even American naval supremacy had limits when facing determined asymmetric attack. That boat paid immediately for its success. Phalanx fire converged on it from 2 systems simultaneously, obliterating the vessel in a storm of depleted uranium rounds that left nothing but wreckage and bodies in the water. The 4th and 5th boats were destroyed moments later, one capsizing after its hull was perforated, the other's engine exploding under sustained fire.
At 5:58 a.m., the remaining Iranian boats, including the intact third-wave boarding craft that had never entered effective weapons range, made their final calculated move. Rather than continue a suicidal assault against overwhelming firepower, they executed a coordinated retreat at maximum speed, but not toward Iranian territorial waters. Instead, they turned northeast toward the approaches to the Strait of Hormuz, deliberately drawing American pursuit toward areas heavily mined and pre-positioned with coastal anti-ship missiles. The message was clear: chase us and risk your destroyers in waters we control absolutely. Captain Richardson recognized the trap immediately. Do not pursue beyond current positions. Maintain defensive perimeter around the carrier. Launch recovery operations for survivors. The tactical discipline held. American forces would not be baited into an operational environment where Iranian advantages multiplied exponentially. By 6 a.m., 11 minutes after initial detection, the engagement concluded. 20 Iranian boats had been completely destroyed, sunk, or blown apart, their wreckage drifting across square kilometers of Gulf waters. 8 more were disabled, taking on water, their crews abandoning ship or desperately trying to stay afloat. The remaining 10 boats escaped at high speed, carrying survivors and proof that they had actually struck an American supercarrier. Of 200 Quds Force Commandos committed to the assault, 73 floated in the water awaiting recovery, 41 were confirmed dead, and 86 had retreated aboard surviving vessels. The USS Abraham Lincoln had sustained damage, minor by naval standards, but psychologically significant. A penetration of hull plating, localized fire damage in a storage compartment, and systems requiring repair. No American casualties, no operational degradation. Within 2 hours, flight operations resumed, but the supercarrier had bled, and that changed calculations across the entire region. The tactical lessons were immediate and profound. Iranian planners had executed a textbook asymmetrical operation: reconnaissance, layered attack formations, exploitation of timing gaps, and strategic withdrawal before losses became total. Yet the cost-benefit analysis was brutal. 20 boats destroyed, 73 elite personnel casualties for superficial damage that would be repaired within a week. American defensive systems had performed with devastating effectiveness, destroying 70% of attackers while sustaining 0 casualties. But the penetration to 800 meters exposed vulnerabilities in layered defense concepts when facing truly coordinated swarm attacks. The geopolitical aftershocks rippled outward with stunning speed. In Tehran, hardliners celebrated striking an American carrier, unprecedented in decades. Military pragmatists questioned the loss of 20 boats and 73 elite commandos for superficial damage that would be repaired within a week. State media broadcast footage of the burning vessel alongside images of returning heroes, crafting a narrative of David bloodying Goliath while omitting casualty figures. In Gulf capitals from Riyadh to Abu Dhabi, defense ministers absorbed contradictory lessons. American defensive systems had destroyed 70% of attackers in 11 minutes with 0 casualties, devastating proof of technological superiority. Yet determined attackers had touched a supercarrier, proving vulnerabilities existed. Saudi Arabia accelerated procurement of Aegis-equipped frigates. The UAE fast-tracked coastal defense modernization. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 21 million barrels of oil transit daily, became the focus of furious strategic recalculation. Iranian threats to close the strait had been theoretical. Now they had empirical backing. Insurance rates for tanker traffic spiked 17% within 72 hours. The global energy market absorbed a new variable, proven Iranian willingness to fight and die in Gulf waters, balanced against American capability to inflict disproportionate casualties. Russia praised Iranian defensive actions while quietly reassessing asymmetric naval doctrine. China observed with intense interest, recognizing parallels to Taiwan Strait scenarios. Israel intensified naval cooperation with Gulf states, viewing the engagement as validation of shared threat perceptions. Most significantly, the engagement shattered comfortable assumptions on both sides. American planners had believed supercarrier defenses effectively invulnerable to small boat swarms. That assumption died with the RPG strike at 5:58 a.m. Pentagon analysts initiated comprehensive reviews of close-in defense protocols. Iranian strategists had built doctrine around overwhelming American defenses through numerical superiority. 20 destroyed boats questioned whether such tactics produced anything except martyrs. The Persian Gulf strategic balance had shifted into dangerous equilibrium, where both American technological dominance and Iranian asymmetric aggression had been tested and found simultaneously effective and insufficient. Neither side achieved maximum objectives. Iran touched but didn't seriously damage a carrier, while America destroyed most attackers but failed to prevent defensive penetration. The potential for miscalculation increased when both sides possessed credible capabilities alongside significant vulnerabilities. The next crisis would unfold where 11 minutes of violence had rewritten the rules without determining a victor.